All right, we're back. Took yesterday off, ended up playing some games with some friends, and stayed up late enough. I didn't really feel like you know getting on. Sam will stream for 30 minutes, and then end up streaming until 2 or 3 in the morning. So um, tonight we're gonna finish up the great Testening. So we're just gonna have a part two to what we started day before yesterday. So first thing, I need to go through what we've done just to kind of jog my memory, get myself back ready to work on what we were working on. So we're going to go through the pull request in its entirety real quick. Um, so I did yesterday during the day, went through it and did some like little odds and ends things. Um, here in our web server Bootstrap, I went and replaced hard-coded references to WAC chat and our SSL port with configuration variables. So these can be changed. The idea was that these could be changed for testing purposes if needed. Um, so the test environment could set those environment variables, start the server, and then go. Again, the amount of times we'll really want to have the full app running for a test suite or whatever to do like a full end-to-end thing, I want to limit. Have very few of those tests, but for our like core stories, it probably it's worth doing. Um, did some renames of our global setup and teardown. If you remember, we had like these in test utils, and it was called like just setup and teardown. Did some more research, looking around at what others were doing, and this seemed to be an even more common pattern that folks were following. So went in and kind of fell in with that. Um, okay, so here's our connects file. We adjusted this happened day before yesterday. We were just making room to have a test configuration. And then we also found that Connects, if you set this database and it doesn't exist, Connects gets really, really angry with you. So we had to make sure to put our database creation in that global setup. I added a new endpoint to the API for serving the API specification itself. And this ended up being part of a test I wrote that we'll look at down further for verifying that we can run the Express server during the test suite, during setup, fire a real query against it, and then shut everything down. I will say, a lot of the time, you don't actually need. You may need a database for, you know, doing kind of end-to-end tests or whatever on your application, but there's a library we'll look at later called Supertest, which makes it so that you at least don't need to run a web server. Supertest kind of wraps the Express app, your Express app, and then you can send requests to the Express app without like it's simulating HTTP requests, but you don't actually have an Express server listening on a port or anything like that. In our case, we actually do want that because the tests we're going to write are going to be written from the perspective of a composition function or a composable. So that's actually going to be using Axios to make queries against what it needs to be the real deal. And those are going to be kind of our feature tests, those core narrative tests that I was just talking about. Okay, so these changes here, kind of interesting. So test watch, I had watch all in here, and it basically means anytime any of it just would scan the directory, look for all the tests, and anytime any of them change, it would rerun that one. Dash dash watch, if you're inside of a Git repo, it uses the Git repo state to know which tests need to be run. So if if I get status and I've got a clean working directory with no changes, then it's likely going to run the test once, but if I ran it again, it wouldn't run anything. If I change a test, it'll run that. If I change code that no test is dependent on, then it won't run any test. So it's kind of like a run the minimum amount of tests based on the change you've made, and then it uses get to track the changes that you've made. So that's kind of neat. The other thing I found was this -- force exit flag. If you recall, our test suite would hang at the very end because we had a connects instance that would hold its connection open past the test suite ending. And you get like this yellow warning down at the bottom that would say, use -- detect open handles to see if you can figure out what it is. Force exit just forces the jest process to end at the very end. And I think that's what we're going to roll with for purposes of like CI. So, GitHub's going to run npm test, and then it'll do jest -- force exit. What I found with us having that global setup that killed the connects instance is that when I would go to just watch, and the goal there is to just have just running all the time and not have to manually run it over and over. When I did that, the first time Jess would rerun the tests, that database connection would go away and it wouldn't restart it. So you'd get like it was like could not acquire connection error or something like that. So, we're going to roll with this for a little bit and not worry about it too much. I spent like 30 minutes or so trying to pour through GitHub issues and different documentation and figure it out, and it's not valuable. If I found an answer, it'd be more like I'd have this like sense of, oh, I'm doing it the right way. But as long as it's serving us, it's doing it the right way. This was a small change just to make sure that we are only restarting the node process when a backend change is made. The way it was configured is if I had a JavaScript file in the front end code and I changed it, it would restart the backend. Which isn't a huge deal because it restarts pretty quick, but didn't need to happen. There's configuration stuff. Okay, here's the controller for serving the OpenAPI spec. So we set the content type to text plain, then send the contents of our spec file. This is the auth cookie domain settings are now using that config variable. This actually needs to be, I need to go back and change this. This was me trying to debug something, and really this can remain this one-liner. So let's make us a note. Make sure to revert this patch. This can be simple. This is more of what we did the day before yesterday. We're setting up for multiple test environments. All right, so we started this the day before. My cat is going crazy. I don't know if y'all can hear him, but on the video, but he is going wild. This is a test we started the day before yesterday, and I found out the error we were facing. We spent like 30-40 minutes trying to trace down was when we called channel create. Instead of name here, I had body, and my mind was on like messages, so the message body, but we were talking about channels. So what it was actually complaining about was that this name binding in the prepared statement that runs here was unbound. Let's let this cat out. All right. So anyway, once I changed that, it was all good to go. So the rest of this test reads pretty well. Let me pull this up and we'll look at it over here in a little bit. Look at assertions as well. All right, so this I'm going to go over in the code on the left. We won't talk about this right now. But this one's a pretty pretty nifty little change I found. Feature I found. Here is, actually we use this as our example of that. These are now empty. Their contents has been pushed to this express environment class over here, which we'll go over. And this can probably go away. But okay, so that's everything. So let's look at the assertions real quick. So what we wanted to write was a test where I would kind of I'd set up a new user, I'd set up a channel owned by that user, and then make some assertions on the state of the database. So this test is, these, I don't like having a whole lot of these because it's like, think how to phrase it. The test doesn't read like a story. It's not reading like, you're not seeing behavior here. There's no logic going on here. It's, I'm creating some stuff, and then because I have knowledge of the database schema and the fact that the user model finder creates rows in a user's table in a certain format, and same thing for channels, then I can kind of like look under the hood and see, oh yeah, there's these things that have happened. I prefer my tests read more kind of logically. So if there was some rules around like who could create, then like none of this stuff would be here. It'd just be like, if there was a rule that this user couldn't create a channel, I would just use my models to demonstrate that and kind of leave the details of the database out of the test suite. But these are handy every now and then. So we made 3 different database assertions. So we basically ripped these ideas from Laravel's test assertions. So assert database count looks in a table and tells you how many, it asserts that there are so many rows in that table. So after running finder create once, I expect there to be 1 row in the user's table, and I expect that the database has 1 row in the user's table matching this constraint, right? So since our username was test, I'm looking for a row in the database with a username field set to test. And this will do that. So same thing with channels. Assert database has a channel with these details. So here's, a good example of, in our model, we refer to owner as just owner. In the database, it's stored as owner ID. So yeah. And then we also have an assertion for assert that something is missing from the database. So it's the opposite of has. So this is just really like, again, you would never write this like in an actual test. This has not a whole lot to do with anything going on here. And it looked kind of random on purpose, I guess. So this is basically just saying there isn't some bullshit in the database in this example. But then these are very simple. It use connects to query, make some query on the database, and then it's just a just matcher expectation. So query all rows from the table given through this argument, expect that those records have a certain length given through the second argument, and so on and so forth. So those are our assertions, and we'll use those sparingly, but I'm sure they'll get used. So the other was we wanted to be able to have tests that have access to a database running, and not only that, express like a web server running on top of it, so the actual API is running on top of that database. So what I found was that you can set up different environments for tests, and that environment has a setup and a teardown function that runs for each test, or it runs at the beginning of a module and at the end of a module. So what this is saying is that this module, Express Canary Test.js, runs inside of the Express environment. And you could have multiples of these. Like we might have another environment that's just the database, right? No express server, and then it would only do the databasey things. So when we have this annotation up here, we say, okay, this points to the express environment. That means whenever this module loads, it'll set up a database, migrate the database, seed the database, and then start an express server. And when all that's done, it kind of releases control to the test suite, and then it runs. And then at the end, we stop our express server. We destroy our database. And if you ran these in parallel, you could even configure this so that maybe if you've got like 3 of these going at the same time, it ends up with 3 express servers on 3 different ports with 3 different databases, right? We may do that, but I don't want the focus on that right now. So like our test suite runs it's one worker that just runs sequentially through everything. So we don't need to worry about that yet. But anyway, this was kind of proof that that was working. So I just bring in Axios, which is a HTTP client, and we run this inside of our Express environment and issue a GET query to this global.address. So it's like, where does this come from? We'll get to that. But this basically points to the Express instance that is started. And we go to /API/OpenAPI YAML, and we expect response data to contain title WAC. So if I set this to just 2 or whatever, something that's not going to be there, we can look at how this fails. So we'll do just express canary. So we expect this to fail because WAC2 doesn't exist at all. But if we scroll up, we see expected substrings title WAC, receive string this. This is where the title WAC comes from. It's just the info of the API. And we could have picked anything else down here, and that would have been fine. But this is proof that the fact that we received this means our Express server sent a response of that. So that's good. So yeah, let's go and look at what that Express environment looks like, and also explain this global and where it's coming from. So if we look at this class, we create an environment that extends from the Jest node environment. And there's another one of these for JS DOM if you're doing like front-end testing. In this case, we're basically creating an environment for our API to kind of live in. So it's all node based. But anyway, this setup function, you'll notice like this is familiar code. This is pulled from our what was in our global setup code. So we drop the database. I need to come in here and put like some if exists or whatever, but we can do that later. So we drop the database, create a database, we use that database, we migrate it, we seed it. Okay. And then to start the Express server, we have the code for this looks a little wonky because app.listen doesn't have a promise interface that we can await. So we have this callback where it's like, here's your listen port. This is the port. So 0 means just bind to any available port, which means it's going to be random. So we'll have to remember, okay, we got to go get that after it starts. We give the host name. And then the last thing is a callback. So in this case, we're basically creating a promise to be able to pass our resolve function to that callback. So when app.listen is done, it calls the callback, which is our resolve function, which resolves this promise. This await basically just tells it to stall there until that promise resolves. So that when this is done, we know there's something in this server variable. So we can say global.server equals server. Global.address equals HTTP, the server host name, which will be WAC chat. And then this is the port that the server was bound to. So this will be something random. So in our tests, this is where that global.address came from. And if we ever needed to, we could access global.server as well. I think it's going to be rare that we ever want to do that, but it's there. The teardown function is a little bit simpler. We kind of do what we did up in the setup function in reverse. So we stop the server, which I think I need to, whatever. I should, I think, await this, but it really doesn't matter. We drop the database, then we create a fresh database. So it's kind of a way of just quickly throwing away everything. And then we call our super classes teardown function. So the node environment teardown function. So that's about it. And I haven't played around with this a whole lot other than here to see it work. So I know it starts in Express server. So what I wanted to do next was write a composition function for maybe our user class to get them logged in, maybe get the current user or something like that. So let's go do that real quick. And I keep saying like composable function or whatever. I don't know that there is like a taxonomy for this yet. I don't know. Like if you go, say if you use.org, this is a set of it's a library of these things I'm talking about. So collection of essential composition utilities. But I've heard people when they're talking about this, they're like, well, I've got a folder in my app called composables, and it's where I put all my like hooks, or it's where I put all my compose functions. But they're basically talking about functions that return elements of the view composition API. This is actually a really awesome package here. They've got, you see this pattern of like use active element, use breakpoints. There's some stuff down here for like, is it use battery? Yeah, use battery. So anytime I say like composition function or composable, this is kind of what I'm thinking about. It's like you're using some part of the API in our case. So it's like use user, use channels, use messages, something like that. But you can see kind of like we're going to organize our code kind of like this. And this is very, very similar to what I've seen, in other like blog posts or stuff on View Mastery or whatever. But these functions will return an object that has all these different types of data that are pertinent to whatever your composition function is doing. So in this case, we're talking about like battery stats for the current device. So whether or not the thing is charging, the number of seconds until it's fully charged, the number of seconds before it's fully discharged, and the charging level. So when you do this, all of these are reactive state. So imagine this battery function is using all the standard like HTML or JavaScript APIs for querying your battery state and calculating charging time and calculating discharging time and all those things. And it returns those as reactive state, so refs and computed values and all of that. And then you can just use these, and as your battery changes, these update. So you could watch these, you could build your own computed props off of these, and they would fire whenever your battery state changes. So it's kind of neat. So you can almost imagine like in a scenario where, say you're writing an API or you're writing a front end where you're going to like poll the back end every like 10 seconds to get up to date state or something. Inside that composition function, you'll return whatever that state is as a ref. But then inside the composition function, you can have a set timeout going that updates that state, and that would automatically send queries on behalf of whoever's using this function for you, and keep it up to date. And in your calling code, so in a component, you don't have all that stuff you have to worry about. Like you don't have to worry about setting the timeout and storing that ID on the component instance so that when it's unmounted, you can stop the timeout, and like that type of stuff. It's just all handled for you inside that function. So I think that was a decent explanation, but it'll get clearer when we actually do it. But remember, viewuse.org is a great resource for just all sorts of random stuff. And they're adding a lot to it too, so I'm sure they're open to contributions if you have a great idea. But then, if you Google around a little bit more, you'll find things like, okay, so @view composables. I don't know if this is like a vendor that other packages are organized under, but I did kind of peek at this a little bit, and it was interesting. I don't think we'll end up using this, but you can see they have like dealing with pagination and stuff like that is very common. That's a perfect use case for a composable function. But let's see, hopefully it's the documentation for okay, so this is similar to viewuse. So this library is bringing together a bunch of different stuff. Let's look for Axios, because that's what I was mostly interested in for now. So they have a use Axios, and then you pass it a URL, and you get access to a bunch of state. So I think like, what was it, execute or exec or something? Yeah, exec and cancel. So exec, basically you can run like a get query or something like that. But the point is, it's like a lot of this like loading state and all of that you would have to write yourself. So it's like everyone's done this. You'll have like Axios dot, you'd say like this dot loading equals true, and you'll call Axios dot get to a URL, and then when that resolves, you'll do something. If it errors, you'll do something, and finally you'll set this dot loading to false. This handles all that for you, captures the result and the error for you as reactive state. So, kind of neat. So for us, we'll close this out, and I think I'd already created something in this direction. Yeah. So user test, and then this was empty. So what we want to be able to do is log in and then expect that our current username and password matches what we log in with. So it's really, really simple example. So we kind of, if you notice, there's no implementation over here. So that's something, remember when you're writing your tests, you're free to kind of write the code you wish you had and dwell on this for a little bit and make sure it's actually, ergonomic to use and not a pain in the ass. So I might stop here and write that first test and then go fulfill like a minimal implementation for that to get it green. I may also just kind of go ahead and write some additional use cases and play around with it more. This, as simple as it is, probably this is all I need to do. So if you look at this, we're going to we need to return this login and user. So login is going to be a function. So we'll go ahead and make that function. And user is going to be reactive state. So we'll say const user equals ref. And we're saying that the initial state before you do anything should be undefined. So we'll say reference to undefined. I don't know if this ref will let us do this. We'll find out. It's typed to accept anything, so let's assume that it does. Right? So this is almost here, or almost there. The login function takes 2 parameters, so username and password. Right. So this would do something. if we wanted to slime this to just get it working, we could do something silly like user.value equals an object where the username and password are set, right? And now if we just user.test watch, it should pass. And we'll be operating from a green state. So it didn't pass. Let's see why. To be undefined. Okay. So this is something that I am going to struggle with a whole lot getting started with the composition API. But what's happening here is this object right here is the ref object itself. Okay. So when you say const user ref, what you actually get, if you want to set the value of that reference, you have to remember to do this dot value stuff. And this will be anywhere in your JavaScript that you're working with that user or that ref. You'll have to remember to do this. The templates automatically unwrap that. So when we actually use this user ref in a template, we don't have to put dot value everywhere. It's just automatically done for you. So here we're expecting the user ref to be undefined, and it won't be. It's always going to be defined no matter what the underlying value is. So we have to do this. And down here, same thing. We'll have to say user value, username, and user value, password. And now it passes. So that'll take some getting used to, but it's pretty, when you're testing, it's pretty quick to see that's what's going on. This also kind of highlights, a benefit of testing. So we caught that before, otherwise we would have written this maybe in like the actual app. And let's imagine it takes, like, we're in a modal and it's like this 10-step wizard modally thing. And this particular code runs on step 8. So you have to step through all that shit again, and then you'd hit your error. So this helps in that regard. So here, let's actually have it do its thing. We can actually log in. So to do that, we're going to import Axios from Axios. And we're going to need a way in our login function of knowing what the current base URL was. And my thought was pass it in here. So something like this, or say just URL. Now this won't be the full URL to whatever endpoint we're using. It's just kind of telling this composition function, here's where your starting point is. So then we could say, to do a login, we'll go look at our spec again. We should send a post to API/login. So do that real quick. Wait response equals Axios that post to URL/API/login. And then in our data object, we're going to have, you need to think about this, it's doing basic auth. So let's look up, I think we just do, I want to say it's this. I want to say it's that. Let's go look it up real quick. Axios basic auth post. Okay, so it's that third argument. Okay. Okay. Yeah, let's do that. So we almost had it. So my username will be username, password will be password, Just double check those were actually the things we need. Because different libraries could have just as well have been user and pass or something. Okay. I don't think we need this, but we may end up needing this. The other thing we could do too is set base URL on this Axios instance. Since this is a, I'm not going to worry about that right now. What we may end up doing in the future is like in our front end code, which this is the actual like real front end code, but what we may end up doing is instead of having like every different composable or whatever pulls in its own Axios instance, we'll probably want to have our own like app-wide Axios instance that's configured to deal with the Paceto stuff. A little more specifically, it should just work because it's going to be cookies, and the browser will send those cookies automatically anytime these requests fire off. But anyway, so here the response we get is going to contain that token, which we don't want to do anything with. So we'll go ahead and do this, but to get the actual user information, we'll need to there's a couple of different ways you could do it. Like, I think honestly, we probably just leave this the way it is, because the thought is, if this succeeds without an error, then that username and password were good, obviously. So that is the username and password you'll send back. In practice, we're probably going to want to create or actually implement this /me endpoint, which I don't think we've done yet. Let's go double check. Yeah, so it's not implemented yet, but this should show like information about the current user. So that might be like the avatar, or we're not going to store email addresses. It just could be other information about the user, right? For now, let's just go with this and see what happens. So we'll run our tests. So that passed. What would be interesting is what if we did return that token? Because right now we don't like know that the test is that our actual implementation is fulfilled, because we're just faking that. We're passing that as true based on this, so I guess we do kind of know it's working because this didn't fail. But yeah, let's see what returning that token would look like. So we'll say token is a ref that's undefined by default, and we'll go back and say, okay, there's a response. Token.value equals response.data.token. And now we could come back over here, grab the token, and draw an expectation on it. So we'll expect that token.value should contain v2.public, I think. I don't know why no failed test found. So it's not rerunning this test for whatever reason. We'll just run this for now. I'll follow up on that, because it should rerun this test. We made changes to it. Okay, so it fails here. Can I read property value of undefined? Okay, so it's because we didn't return it here. So let's do that. And it's passing. Now if I come in here and I say it should contain v2 public 2, it should fail, and there's our token. So now we know it's working because we're getting back a token. So that's kind of cool. So I think I'm going to write, let's see, We'll write one more of these for the channel API, and then probably call it for tonight, because we've already been going for about 40 minutes. So let's come back over here and we'll make, I'm not completely sold on these names yet. I think I'm gonna start out with them in separate files, but I could also see like having just like an API composed, like use API, or call this like API and it exports use users, use channels, use messages, or whatever. But for now, I think I'm gonna keep them separate. So we'll call this channels and channels.test. All right. And then we'll change some of this stuff up. So it's use channels from channels, use channels. Structure will be about the same. It's still going to take that URL. I don't know what we're going to return yet, but I know we'll call use channels. Don't know what our expectations will be yet. And near about none of this will be here. All right. It passes. Awesome. All right, so let's look at all the different things we can do with a channel. We can create channels. We can get a list of channels. We can get a specific channel. We can delete, update channels. We can join and leave channels. So we'll say first thing I'm going to want to do is create maybe a find by ID. Something else to think about is this is written from the perspective of a client of our API. So if you notice, I just kind of like it needs to be find by RID. It's like they don't know what a RID is. To the API client, it's just the channel's ID. So maybe I do a find by name as well. Just gonna call this spike for right now. So I can create, I can find it by ID, I can find it by name. I can list all channels. This might get renamed to like filter or something like that. But I could also see list. Maybe list is its own thing. I don't know. We'll see with list. I can join and leave a channel. Delete a channel. Let's look at the actual channel model. I don't remember how exactly it is editable. Did we actually like implement that? Would be my next question. So let's go to our channels controller and look for the update. We didn't even implement that, right? So first thing is let's go make a note to revisit that at some point in the future. It's not important that it is done right now, because we're really focused on getting to the UI as fast as we can. Implement ability to change channel. So to update channels. And I just about imagine starting out, it'll just be channel name. Like we'll just let them change the channel name. And that'll be it. What's this complaining about? Who knows? Okay, close that, close that. Oh, it's a reserved keyword. Well, we're not deleting, we're archiving for that. We're archiving the channel, which I think is more, that's the language we're using anyway in the model. So that makes sense. So we're going to move that to the end. It's like the last thing we do. Right. All right. So what I'm going to do is write, I named this spike to just kind of, it's like you're spiking an implementation to get something out there. We're going to write this up like a story. And then we'll go do the implementation once we get that story written. So the first thing is we're going to need a user to play around with. So what if we go ahead and pull in our user composable over here, and then we can say const login user equals use user little address, right? And we can await login for whack, and then our user will be set by doing that. So now we can come down here and be like, okay, well, I want to create a channel. So I can await create, and I'm gonna have to give it some details. So we can go look at the spec and see all what we need here. So just a name is it. So we'll call it just call it whack dev. Okay. So we'll create that, and we'll probably go ahead and have something like, I think this should return the channel instance. In this case, it doesn't make sense as much to have this like user ref floating around. And even maybe in this case, it doesn't make sense to have this user ref floating around. Maybe it should be const user equals await login. And then that's that. But I guess this function is more around like authentication. So maybe this should be, so there is going to be one user. Your authenticate is one user, to be one token. So maybe that's a signal this should be called use authentication instead. We're not going to worry about it now. So we get our channel. We've already got a failure. What's this failure? Okay, so create's not a function. Now, this is one aspect of test-driven development that I do kind of still. First, I agree, TDD is an excellent practice to follow. I'm not, it isn't you shouldn't treat it as like shackles around your wrists, keeping you from making progress or doing something. So, but one aspect of TDD I did like was that whenever you're, writing this code you wish you had, the goal is to get to green as fast as possible. So, and you slime things to get there. But a lot of the, I'm trying to think how to word this. You basically want to get all these types of failures, like a function doesn't exist, get this out of the way as soon as possible and get just enough there to make something that works. But don't focus on like full implementation yet. You want to stay in this design mindset as long as possible. So in a lot of ways, like if I thought this was preventing me from staying in that design mindset, which obviously it's already diverted us 30 seconds while I talk about this, then you might just decide stop the test suite and be done. Which I think that's what I'm gonna do, because I've already talked through this more than I wanted to. But the one thing I do like is like this would be if I were kind of on my own in my own flow, I'd get this red as soon as I type that, and then go write me a create function, and then return it here, and then walk away, and I'm good. Maybe I might have it return an object, so there's something there, right? You know what? Let's just do that. So I'll come back over here and we'll say function create name returns an empty object, right? And we know that's going to have some properties of the channel on it at some point, but I don't want to think about that right now. I'll only think about that when I actually need to. So we'll return create. So now this should be happier, right? Okay, it passes. So we keep on rolling. So I want to find by ID. So we'll say a channel found by ID equals find by ID channel ID, right? So we'll do that, and it'll fail for a couple of reasons. First, it'll fail because find by ID isn't a function, so we can remedy that. We're doing this and this. Unexpected. Oh, you gotta finish your method bodies there. Okay, so it's not even mad that this doesn't exist, which is fine by me for right now. Now, where this will get mad is we should expect that channel we'll do this just to keep it simple. There is I want to find the jest matcher that matches object properties, but not by reference or whatever. I think if you say expect channel to be channel found by ID, it'll fail that because it's technically two separate objects, even though they have the same properties. They should have the same properties. So anyway, we'll do this, and then we'll do the same thing for a channel found by name. And then this will be channel name. This will be not what I wanted. Name, right? So I'm going to find by name, which is going to kick this back over to fail. So we'll go ahead and type that out. Right, okay. Now we need to list all. So we've only got one channel in here. So we can say channels equals await list all. And we're going to expect channels to have length of 1. And we should expect channels 0.id to be channel ID. So this is going to fail because same reason these have failed. But I also want to get this passing vacuously because now we've got some assertions in here that should be failing, right? Because these IDs, these names aren't set, these IDs aren't set. It's just angry. That's what it is. So set value length be a number, so we're going to have list all return an array, right? Length is 0. We'll make it have an object. It's fine. So the question is why is this is passing because they're both undefined. So it's fine with that. If we wanted to make that fail, we could put an expectation that it should not be undefined. But that's also kind of a, it should be a given. So I'm not gonna worry about these. We'll actually make it. We'll use green to do our implementation, and it'll stay green, and we'll be good. So now I need to join a channel. Look at my model real quick. I can't remember if we pass in the current user or not. Which I guess that doesn't matter from the purpose of the API because I'm just going to join that. Oh wait, yeah, we had that channel membership object. Yeah, join channel. Okay. But either way, we're just sending a post request to our join endpoint here, right? So we just call join. Trying to think where I want to put the like list my channels. This probably belongs on this user thing. We could have a ref here. Maybe we call it channel list. Channels. Join channels. I don't like that name all that much, but The other thing is we could punt it, and we won't have an assertion that this works other than the fact that it just, you know, it just works. Yeah, let's just do that. So we'll join channel.id, and we'll leave channel.id. We're gonna and then last thing's archived. So what we should be able to do is say when I archive channel.id, then I expect there not to be any more channels left. So I could say await list all to have length 0. And we'll throw archive in there. All right. So this is kind of like, you could come through and be like, you know, user logs into whack. And they create a new channel called whack dev. One, they are able to find the channel that was created. They are able to list all channels. They can join and leave channels. Finally, users can archive channels. So we'll end the night with this all in one big monster test or whatever, but in a better organization for this would be to like start to break this up by different scenarios, because there's more tests in here that we aren't running, namely around joining and leaving. Like, I shouldn't be able to leave a channel that I'm not a member of. Now the question is, should that throw an error? I don't know, but there should be a test around that just to show that's something you wouldn't do. Maybe I should be able to archive channels that I'm not the owner of, so we could have a test for that. But just to get through everything, we're just going to have this one. And this is very common to have, like, maybe you call these feature tests or something, and they follow a narrative from beginning to end, but they're almost like mostly happy path. They're just showing the positive case all the way through, just to show how the feature works. So you can, by writing this and by keeping it green, you're kind of operating from a perspective or a position of safety. And you can go write those other tests you might even decide at the very end of this, you throw this test away completely. So it's almost like this is a pilot hole you're drilling to get the feature done, but you know, it may not offer much value at the end of it. So that's just a judgment call. So let's come back over here. I don't think we are going to have any refs here. We played around with this like get my channels list thing, but I'm going to leave that out for now because I think that's maybe going to be better placed in another composition function. I can't think of a name for it either right now. So just punt it because I don't really need to think of a name of it. What is, oh, receive link 1. Okay. This is a good case here where like this is a failure that arises out of different scenarios driving this static slimed implementation, and this is kind of a good place for you to be. You know, so list all shouldn't accept anything either. That's just a copy paste issue. Okay, so we're going to I create a channel by sending a post request to API/channels, and it has to include the name. So let's do that real quick, and it should return the full channel to me. So we can say const response, if I can type, await Axios post to URL/API/channels. And then we're going to send data of name equals name. I'll shorten that. So response.data should include our channel. So I should be able to just return response.data. And then this work. So let's see, cannot use await outside of an async function. So all of these are going to be async. So we'll go ahead and do that. Request failed with status code 401. So let's think. It's unfortunate. So in a normal browser environment, the browser would take care of sending this this token back for us. And that's not happening here. And I don't want to do something like pass the token here into this composable function because it's not going to be something we do. But for tonight, to get it going, I think that's what I'm going to do. So we'll pass the token value in to this composable function, and then we can use that. We can set a header in our Axios client to deal with that. This is really gross. I don't like this. So we're going to need to find a way of testing this, but I'll do that off stream later to not eat up a bunch of time. That said, I am going to go ahead and make an Axios instance here that I can reuse to not have to do the same code over and over and over. So we'll say const client equals axios.create. And then here we can set things like base URL is URL and headers author is bearer, and then put the token in there. So now I can come down here and say client API channels. We need to make sure that, let's run that again. So it's still failing. We need to make sure that this authorization header is what we want. Is that the right thing? I think we actually need to set it as a cookie. Only because that's the way the security thing or whatever is set up. So here our bearer auth is a token, something called token in the cookie. So let's go look up Axios set cookie. Axios set cookie or request. Headers cookie. Okay. I don't think it'll be as easy as just setting the cookie because we won't have all the extra stuff, the domain and all that mess. We can try it though. We can try doing this just cookie token equals. But I don't think it'll work. Let's run it one more time. Yeah, because it needs all the other thingamajigs. Really didn't expect to hit this so much. What's the other way we could do this? We could go into the Insomnia real quick and just get our cookie value and go that route. Let's do that. Insomnia. Let's log in. Let's start that. So this will be good for at least a little bit. All right, so we got something different. That's good. All right, so to get that error message, we need to wrap this in a try catch. Let's see what it says. Cannot read property ID of undefined. What? Oh, no. It's something different. Okay. Wonder if we can see the state of that database real quick. Probably not. Probably not, because it should be cleaned up by now. Yeah. So this is complaining you can't insert a row in there where the owner ID is 3, which if this is a fresh database, it shouldn't have a third user. So I don't know where that's coming from. Let's see, console.log. So way we could do this. I wanted to chill for a little bit after it makes that user. So we could say await new promise, resolve, set timeout, resolve, no, this, we'll have it wait like 10 seconds. So we gotta be quick. Say select from users. User ID's 1 in here. Okay. So when I do this, then you know what? I bet it's this. I bet our little cookie thing ain't gonna work. We'll think for about here. Okay, so the authentication data doesn't have anything to do with the database or the let's log in through Insomnia as the same user we're using over here so that we'll have a token that authenticates them. You know what? The token includes the ID in it. That's what's going on. We have the ID and the username in the token. So what we need to do is find user 1 in our local database. So we'll say use whack and select from users. So user whack. Yeah, so this should work if we copy this cookie data. So let's do this real quick. Go ways in. Zoom's trying to open and cause trouble. So we'll log in. We'll grab this value, and I'll have this fixed by tomorrow. We really shouldn't have to do this at all. I bet if we were reusing the same Axios client across these two, then the Axios client might capture the cookies and store that cookie jar so that it's reused across requests or whatever. Oh, let's get rid of this. Okay, so it's different. We're closer. So we actually made it through our channel create. So I, for now, am going to remove all this error handling. We are going to use this. I didn't really want to get too far into it tonight, but one thing we want to do is on any of these compose functions, they're going to throw an error. You might decide, oh, I want to throw have an error snack bar show up in the UI or have some dedicated place where logging happens. So what we'll do is make us a generic logging interface that just logs to console.error for now. But then we could hook in whatever we want to that later. So you could say, when this event is logged, then I show a toast notification versus not. And that'll give us a nice little interface to kind of have this pluggable. Not everything is shown as a toast notification, but some things are, some things are snack bars, some things just go to the console. Okay, so find by ID should be we're going to query client, set const response equals await client.get API channels ID. And then we'll return response.data. And find by name, we may not be able to do yet. So let me bag that one out. That's going to be a query against the collections channel, or sorry, the channels collection. So the way that would look is something like, should be name. Let's say const response because await client get API channels filter name equal name. But we don't support this yet. So for right now, I'm just going to remove that feature altogether, and we will implement that. That honestly could be a stream in and of itself, because that'd be something we do across all of our collections. We want them all to be similarly filterable, not by the same keys and things, but like the structures. You saw like I had that filter bracket name. That should be a common theme through everything. All right, so find by ID should do this. When I list all, I should have one in there. So let's go do that. Const response equals await client.get API channels. And we will return response.data. So you can see a lot of these are looking kind of boilerplatey. Interesting. So because we haven't implemented this archive, this one's going to fail until we do. Let's go ahead and do our join. So again, this is one that'll either work or not. So this one, I think I am going to go ahead and wrap in a, well, I'm going to say I go ahead and wrap it and then return, like throw a generic exception or something, but we'll just keep it simple for now. So let's say API channels ID join, and we don't really return anything. It just kind of does it. Same thing here. Send a post to leave. All right, archive. We'll do send a little, it won't return anything, but we can say client delete API channels ID. Now our test should pass. And it did. So, so this is kind of cool. I'd say the more cool one is the user, because we have this reactive state stuff going on. But this is kind of neat, because this gives us a way of writing code that's going to be immediately useful to our view components, and then we can write clean tests for them. Because you think, like, traditionally, if I were going to do an end-to-end test, or like if I was going to do an end-to-end test, I'd be like writing tests that are using Axios in the test to query the API, maybe. All right, I said that wrong. If I'm going to do API tests, I do that. But think about all that Axios code you're writing that is only useful to the test. I don't get to leverage that as part of my source code base. Whereas this approach, I'm just one layer removed, so I'm testing using this abstraction. It's the same abstraction as my component's going to be. So it's almost like the tests are just they're the first client to this code coming to existence. The component will be the second client to it. But all this Axios code gets used by both. So that's efficient. When it comes to end-to-end tests, I probably, like, let's say I wasn't doing this composable stuff. I wouldn't write separate API tests if I also wanted to do my end-to-end tests. Now, I'd still have API tests that maybe I don't have front-end coverage over or whatever. But if I knew, no, I'm going to hit a narrative through the front end and it's going to touch the API and I'm going to need that Express server and I'm going to need a database, then I would be like, visit this page, click on this button, see this link, da 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 da, and that would be exercising that full stack. I like this a lot better. Honestly, if this goes well, I'll probably never write another end-to-end test because it's just such a pain in the ass always to like want to look for this text. Click this link. You wait on something to load. I'm waiting, 5 seconds for this request to come back from whatever, and then I see this link and I do this, that, and the other, and you got to set up like WebDriver and like all this shit, and it's just annoying. This reads clean and it's maintainable, and it also kind of like it almost makes your components almost throwaway, because a lot of what we're going to write for this app, the UI isn't going to be super complex. It's a big CRUD app. There's not going to be a whole lot of logic in it. Everything's going to be back-end oriented. So anyway, this is as good a point as any to leave off tonight. Like I said, I'm going to fix this at some point, either tonight or tomorrow, so that we don't have to do this. And I think it is going to be reusing this Axios instance, which is what we should be doing anyway, but having that shared Axios instance between use user and use channels should fix it. But if it doesn't, we'll figure it out. But anyway, I'm going to get out of here. I will be on tomorrow around the same time, maybe around 10, a little later tomorrow. But we'll pick right up and probably go ahead and knock out the messages. And if we can do that quickly, like we did this in 20, 25 minutes. If we can do it quickly and get through it, I'll probably go ahead and start doing some UI stuff tomorrow. But anyway, yeah, we will take care of that tomorrow. We'll see y'all later.